10 years ago, I, Detective Ethan Riley, stepped into a horrific murder scene. I found 5-year-old Lily Holden, curled up under a bed, her clothes soaked in her family's blood. She hasn't spoken a single word since that night. The case went stone cold. I adopted her, swearing I would protect her whatever the cost. I knew I failed to catch the killer, but I couldn't fail as her father. For a decade, she communicated only with nods and cryptic notes. I accepted the silence, until the day I gave her a box of paints. Lily's first drawings were chaotic storms of black and red, but then a terrifying image began to repeat, a large, amorphous entity she called the Shadow. It was her mind's way of identifying the killer. I took the drawings to child psychologist Dr. Clara Bennett. She pointed out a new detail, a small shiny object the Shadow was holding. Simultaneously, Lily wrote a chilling warning beneath the sketch. "He's coming back." I dug back into the cold case file, matching the lines on her paper, and found the overlooked evidence, a silver cigarette case. I started noticing the excessive pushback from Ryan Doyle, my old partner and closest friend. He urged me to drop the case, filed an anonymous complaint against me, and even stole Lily's sketches. He was the one who stripped me of my badge and forced my daughter into CPS custody, but the truth couldn't be buried. The K cufflink Ryan dropped at the evidence vault. Lily's final drawing, Ryan Doyle's face with the revenge scar and the black SUV 77. He wasn't my friend. He was the Shadow. When I cornered him, he confessed to killing the Holden family for revenge over his ex-wife. But the most powerful moment was when I saw Lily again. For the first time in 10 years, she spoke a single word, a verdict. Shadow. Drumbeat intensifies, music cuts abruptly. I'll never forget the smell of that night. Pittsburgh dampness, metal, and fresh blood. Red and blue police lights pulsed against the cracked brick wall of the Holden home, painting the darkness in violent flashes that I just wanted to close my eyes against. I'm Ethan Riley, Tom to most, and I've seen death countless times. But the Holden family massacre was burned into my mind, not for its brutality, but for the utter silence of one witness. The front door was kicked in, the family photos shattered on the floor, glass like frozen tears. David, Sarah, and their teenage son Jacob all gone. I followed a faint, tiny tremor, a sound so soft it could have been the wind. It led me to the master bedroom. I knelt, flashlight slicing through the dark beneath the bed. There, curled into a small ball, was 5-year-old Lily Holden. She looked at me with empty, lifeless eyes, her dress stained with someone else's blood. She wasn't crying, wasn't trembling, just silent. That silence weighed heavier than any scream I'd ever heard. My chest tightened, not in horror, but with a sudden, painful sense of responsibility. The bastard who did this missed one thing. Lily was the evidence, the accusation, but she was trapped in her own nightmare, unable to speak, unable to act. I knew then and there this case would never let me go. I had to catch him, not just for the law, but for this little girl. My flashlight was the only thing connecting her to the outside world, and I felt I couldn't pull back. I picked her up, feeling her slight weight, and my world changed forever. In the following weeks, everything fell apart. My file was buried under evidence that meant nothing. No matching prints were found in the system. No witnesses, no motive beyond a botched robbery. But nothing valuable was taken. I spent hours in the briefing room, chewing over every detail, feeling the gridlock of the cold case tightening. Everyone started giving up, labeling it another one of Pittsburgh's insolvable files. But I couldn't. I looked into Lily's silent eyes every time I visited her at the temporary care center. She sat there, a tiny shadow, completely lost in the system's chaos. I heard CPS staff talking about transferring her to a long-term facility where she would be lost in administrative gears. The thought sent shivers down my spine. If I couldn't find the killer, at least I could protect the only living witness. I'd been a detective long enough to know the system could be as cruel as any criminal. I filed for guardianship. The decision wasn't supported by my colleagues or old friends, including Ryan Doyle. They saw a detective who was too invested, self-destructing his career. but I only saw a little girl who needed a safe place to breathe. When I took Lily home, my small townhouse felt too big and too quiet. She moved through my rooms like a small ghost, making no sound, touching nothing. She only communicated with slight nods or scribbled notes. My life, built on order and rules, was upended by a silent chaos. I cooked for two, read comics to one who didn't respond, and opened the cold case file every night with a new motivation. It wasn't work anymore. It was a father's vow. 10 years passed. 10 years of near total silence. Lily, now a teenager, remained a mystery to me. She was smart, did well in school, but reserved and guarded. I learned to read her body language, to recognize the nod that meant yes, the slight shake that meant no, and the eyes on the floor that meant, I don't want to think about it. I had to stop myself from asking her about the case, from trying to investigate my own daughter. This dichotomy tormented me daily. By day, I was Ethan Riley, the man who drove her to school, the one who helped her with geometry homework. By night, I was Tom, wearing a protective mantle, sitting under the dim desk lamp, turning the yellowed pages of the Holden file. Ryan Doyle often urged me to trash it, saying it was eating away at my life. But to me, trashing it was giving up on Lily. It was accepting that the person who took her family had won. Lily's room faced my study, and I always felt her presence a silent reminder of my greatest failure. She grew up in nameless fear, and I, supposedly the best detective, couldn't find its name. I tried my best to create a normal life, a safe haven. But I knew that normalcy was always fragile, haunted by the shadow of that night. For Lily's 15th birthday, I decided to deviate from the usual textbooks or electronics. I gave her a wooden box filled with expensive paints and brushes. It was a risky act, an injection of hope into a dry vein. She accepted the gift, nodded, and placed it on the bookshelf, where it was forgotten for weeks. Then one afternoon, while I was making dinner, I heard a faint, delicate sound from her room. The sound was a brush tracing across paper. A few days later, she left a stack of papers on the dining table. They were the first drawings. They had no clear form, just a pure chaos of intense lines and colors, red and black swirling like a vortex. They were the pure expression of pain. They weren't art. They were wounds. I felt a strange mix of hope and fear. Hope that she finally found an outlet, a way to communicate. Fear that what she was unleashing was too big, too dark. I started observing the drawings, not as a detective, but as a father. But then, the drawings began to change. Within the chaos of colors, familiar shapes started to emerge. A dark house, withered branches, and something large, amorphous, looming. It was the shadow. The recurrence of the shadow image was impossible to ignore. I decided to seek outside help, someone who could decipher this silent language. That's why I went to Dr. Clara Bennett, a child psychologist known for her work in decoding trauma art. I gave her Lily's drawings. She turned over each one carefully, silent for a long time. Finally, she looked at me and explained, "The shadow is a symbol, Detective Riley. It's the killer in her mind. She can't name him, so she names her fear." Her words confirmed my worst fear, Lily remembered. She was recreating what she saw. Dr. Bennett also pointed out a disturbing detail. The shadow in the latest drawings seemed to be holding a small, shiny, rectangular object. It was a new object, a clue. Then I found a new note scribbled in pencil, left under one of the shadow drawings. "He's coming back." My heart sank. He wasn't a distant memory. He was a present threat in her mind. Lily's silence had ended, but it had been replaced by a warning. Lily's warning instantly re-engaged the detective within me. I went back to the cold case file. I started looking for small details that had been overlooked. I went back to Lily's initial drawings. I started noticing a small curved shape that repeated obsessively, woven into the chaotic lines of her initial outburst. It evoked a vague memory. I sifted through the evidence log. I searched for anything curved, anything that could be the key. I recalled the night I found Lily. I had seen everything, but one detail, one tiny detail obscured by the horror, had slipped through my net. I spent 2 sleepless nights fueled only by cold coffee and turning pages. The dead ends of the cold case had taught me that the biggest clues often hide in the smallest, most ignored details. I was determined not to let the shadow of that failure consume me again. Ryan's revenge didn't stop at stealing the sketches. Days after the file vanished, I received a call from Internal Affairs. An anonymous report had been filed, accusing me of exploiting Lily, violating ethical rules. I was immediately suspended, my badge taken, and I was forbidden from accessing any police files. Then came the worst part. Child Protective Services (CPS) arrived. I stood helpless as a calm, stern social worker announced that Lily would be taken into protective custody. I tried to explain about Ryan, the cigarette case, the shadow, but my words sounded insane, evidence that I was unstable. As the CPS car drove Lily away, I felt a physical pain. I was no longer a detective, and now I was no longer a father. I was defeated. Ryan had won. Only hours after Lily was taken away, I got a call from Peter Nichols, the old groundskeeper at the evidence vault. He said he had seen Ryan Doyle sneak into the file room the night before my sketch file disappeared. He also found a silver cufflink engraved with the letter K. I knew this K belonged to Ryan Doyle. I went back to Ryan's records. I found it, an old car accident report 12 years ago. Ryan had a wife, Karen. Karen was severely injured in an accident, leading to huge medical debt and eventually divorce. The person who caused the accident, who drove the black SUV, was David Holden. David got away with it. 10 years ago, Ryan didn't kill David for money or for gambling. He killed David Holden for revenge for Karen. He tried to cover up the case by framing it as a botched robbery. The AK cigarette case wasn't David's. The K cufflink wasn't David's either. They were Ryan Doyle's. I went to Dr. Bennett. She was the only one I could trust. I showed her the cufflink and explained everything. She believed me. She handed me the latest drawings Lily had made at the center. One drawing was Ryan Doyle's black SUV, drawn clearly with the license plate characters, 77. The other drawing was David Holden's face, but on his cheek was a large diagonal scar. This was irrefutable evidence, Lily's confession on paper. Dr. Bennett arranged for a brief meeting with Lily. I entered the room, kneeling down. I said, "I know who the shadow is. I've seen him, and I'm going to stop him." I showed her drawing of Ryan, and for the first time in 10 years she whispered a word. A broken, difficult word, shadow. That word was the verdict, the accusation. I had the evidence, and more importantly, I had my daughter back. I arranged the final meeting with Ryan at the old Braddock Brickyard, a desolate, cold place, perfect for a confrontation. I told him I had some final documentation on the Holden case I wanted him to review before I left the city. A tactical team of loyal old friends from the police was waiting in the darkness. I confronted him. I talked about his wife, Karen, about the car accident, about how David Holden got away with it. I talked about the K cufflink and the AK cigarette case. Ryan's voice was cold, without remorse. "That's right," he admitted. "David ruined my life. He took my Karen, and then he came to me to cover his debts to Reed. He had to pay." He casually described how he killed David, then killed Sarah and Jacob because they saw him. He said he let Lily live because she was too shocked to speak. I handed him Lily's drawing, the one of his face with the scar and the rage. He looked at it, and for the first time his composure broke. He pulled out a gun. The moment Ryan pulled the gun, the tactical team rushed out of the shadows. Ryan didn't surrender. He ran. The chase led through the cement and steel maze of the old brickyard. The pursuit ended on a high metal catwalk overlooking the city. Ryan was cornered, the gun pointed at his head. "They can't take a dead man to trial," he yelled, ready to end his own life. I lunged at him, disarming him. We wrestled, a brutal, dirty fight. I looked into his eyes. "You don't get away," I said, holding him down. "You are going to live. You're going to wake up every day and remember what you did. You're going to live to see Lily grow up, strong, and tell the truth." That's justice. Ryan was sentenced to life without parole. After the trial, the police department offered me my badge back. I refused. I had found the most important job of my life, and it didn't require a badge. I had closed the Holden case, but I had opened a new chapter for my life. Lily came home, and everything changed slowly, subtly. She started talking. The first words were simple, a shy yes or no, a request for a sandwich. But then they became stronger. One evening, while I was doing the dishes, I heard a word I had been waiting for 10 years. Dad. I dropped the plate and it shattered in the sink. But I only heard that word. I turned around and Lily was standing in the doorway, smiling. That was the moment I knew the shadow was truly gone. Months later, on a cool spring afternoon in Senley Park, we sat together. Lily opened her sketchbook. She no longer drew with rage. Her strokes were calm, deliberate. When she turned the page toward me, my chest tightened. The drawing was simple but beautiful. A warm house glowing under a gentle night sky. Light spilled from every window, and smoke curled gently from the chimney. And this time, there were no shadows lurking in the corners. Just home. I looked at her and saw not the frightened 5-year-old I had pulled from beneath a bed, but a young woman reclaiming her life. I reached for her hand. It's beautiful, I said. Lily smiled, and for the first time in 10 long years, I felt the weight of the past finally lift. Justice, I realized, wasn't just what happened in a courtroom. Justice was here, a girl who had lived through the darkness, learning to draw the light again. The case was closed. The shadow was gone, and sitting there beside Lily, watching her sketch a future free of fear, I knew that we had both found what we had been searching for all along.